Sellers.
I'm Susan Sprinkle.
And I'm Brooke Rackley.
Okay. So should I read the case study or?
Yeah, just give a little overview.
Okay. So there's a district, this K-12, and they have 3 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 1 high school. They can't afford their technology program any longer, so one principal at an elementary school decided to host a fundraiser and for smart boards and projectors for every classroom. The fundraiser was very successful, but the other elementary schools could not, their fundraisers were not as successful, so they were unable to do that. So the parents felt that it was unfair for them to have all of that technology, but their elementary schools were not able to do so. So basically, by the time their kids get to the middle school and they're all grouped together, they are at a disadvantage compared to the students that had the technology in place. So our question is, do we think that the parents of the elementary schools have a valid case in asking the school board to adopt a policy for more equitable environment with fundraising and donations? And what steps do we think the school board should take with the parents' request?
The very first thing that popped in my head when it says, do the parents have a valid case, is going back to that very first legal video we watched. Is it Leandro? Mm-hmm. Where it's just established that every child has the right to education, and then we get into the law book and talk about all the needs of all the students, and everybody should have the opportunity for, what's the word? I can't remember what Leandro called it. Something education. Do you remember? I'm drawing a blank. I don't think the word was quality. There was something else, but I can't remember what it is. But that's the first thing I think about. Absolutely. The parents and the students in the impoverished school do deserve something, some sort of policy that regulates the, I can't form my words tonight. The only word I have is equity again. But you know what I'm trying to say. There has to be, someone has to look at that. I do agree with that.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying too, so if they're going to call themselves one school district, they should provide equal amounts of instruction for everyone.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I kind of looked at it a different way, because I felt like the schools were using their money appropriately. Mm-hmm. Like as far as the money that they were allocated, this principal just had more avenues, that he could turn to for this additional money that he needed to enhance his school. So, I mean, I feel like every school and every school district nationwide comes across this. I mean, I'm at a Title I school, and we do not have nearly the resources, and we don't have a PTA at my school. Mm-hmm. But I think there are enough, like I said, avenues you could go down, grants you could write, other ways that you could raise money for your school if your school does not have a PTA. I can understand why the parents would be upset. You all feed into one middle school. And if one school is more advantaged than, the other two, of course that's going to be an issue. But I don't think the school did anything wrong, and I don't see the need for a policy.
See, one thing that we do in Wake County, we have 176 schools, is the school board makes sure the way that our schools are districted, that we don't have schools that are all low economic. Mm-hmm. They mix it in with, they make sure to draw the county or the school line so that schools aren't at a super advantage or super disadvantage to other schools. So at my school, I live in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in my area, but we have 47% reduced and free lunch. So we have super wealthy kids that come to school in, nice cars, and then we have kids with nothing at home.
One
I
thing,
guess I see it in the aspect of I'm at a school where there's 100% free lunch,
Yeah.
and my school looks for other ways to provide when we don't have a PTA that can raise money for Chromebook carts and iPads and things like that. We write grants and look for, community partners, business partners within the community to help supplement.
Yeah.
And I looked up before we got on, to see if the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools had a policy, and their only policy for fundraising is to make sure that when you are doing fundraisers that you say specifically what it's for. It has to be pre-approved by your principal. The funds have to be earmarked and allocated into a certain fund in your banking. They called it something. It has to be in a separate account. So I just kind of looked up to see what our situation was in our county. So there are policies in place.
on page 61 of our book, it says that you can increase fee, which some people say that if you do that, you're not getting a free education. But I feel like if you increase fees, if those parents at the other elementary schools that are not as wealthy, that's having the issues here, if that's a problem for those parents, maybe increase school fees and put that money towards over time, maybe not the first year, because you can't increase school fees but a few dollars.
Right.
Maybe that would be something in the long-term budget. They
Right.
could getting the projectors and the smart boards and all that. Another thing is educational foundations.
Right.
So it talks about donations and things like that. So those are possibilities as well.
Yeah, on that page it talks about, it says as monies run short, more and more school districts are looking for other sources of funding.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about fundraisers, and that's, you just mentioned the educational foundations.
Now, one thing that my school, we're one of the wealthier schools in the district. We have the most students. We also get Title VII funds and all of that. We have Indian education and all of that kind of stuff. So we adopted a new math program the year before last. Well, some of the other elementary schools in our district could not afford to purchase the textbooks like we could. So they took, or with the principal saying that is fine, they took money and distributed it to the other schools so they could afford their textbooks as well. So I noticed in the book it said some schools can tap in to their accounts and donate to other schools. But, we decided on the textbook so the whole county could have the same core in place.
Mm-hmm.
So the same basal.
In our county, students are very transient, so our school system has worked really hard to, if one school's using a program, for another to try, if it's been successful,
Mm-hmm.
To try to stay on the same, because we have such a large Hispanic population in our county, and students are very transient. So if they start with a program at one school and then transfer somewhere else, there's not a huge gap.
Mm-hmm.
So, I understand the need and want to have technology. And it just reminded me of reading Brooks' paper and all that technology that her school had from all that grant money they got. It seemed like the same thing to me. I immediately thought of Brooks School when I read this.
Well, I think, writing grants, that's a good way to get what you need. I think in this particular situation, it's a little bit different from textbooks because you want to use the same thing from, across your district. Mm-hmm. Now, as far as this goes, I feel like they did the work. They put in the effort. Not that the other school systems did not, but like you were saying, Susan, at the beginning, if they got the money for it, they should be able to use it. And the other schools will have to come up with other ways to get that.
Right.
I do know at least here, we are limited on the number of fundraisers we can do. So a school, is it Westlake or whatever the name of that school was, can't just keep doing that and raising gazillions of dollars. There are limits on how many fundraisers you can have.
Right. And I was thinking for that school, they could start out and implement their technology a grade level at a time.
Mhm.
Maybe their school couldn't raise that amount of money in 1 year for the whole school, but maybe they could start, with kindergarten or start with fifth grade, whichever direction you want to start. I'd probably start with the older kids since those are the ones going to feed into the middle school if you think there's a disparity there. Start with your fifth graders and incorporate what your money will allow as it allows.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it may take a lot longer, but I feel like it could still happen.
And maybe they could take a look at a district at what they're using their instructional money for,
right?
Resource money. Because I was looking at some of the funding, the different types of funding throughout. Maybe they could do some priority-based budgeting or something like that. Like take a look at.
Well, I wonder too if those other schools, since they weren't as I'm looking for the word. It didn't say. I don't know, but if the other schools, if they were more economically disadvantaged, if they wouldn't get at-risk funds or, when it did talk about the different types of funding and it said that they, schools would get at-risk funds and things like that, maybe their schools would qualify for some of that.
Mm-hmm. So, but I would the first thing, if I were in that situation, I would look for, like the educational foundations, like it said, and
right.
What type of fundraisers or grants that could be written. And I think that's a good idea. Like you were saying, start with the older kids because that's who, they're more concerned over.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to the question on page 66, it says, what steps do you think the school board should take with regards to the parent's request? Mm-hmm. If we think as a school board member, what would we say to that group of parents that came to bring this request?
I thought about, I went back and looked at No Child Left Behind because I remember it said in that legislation that schools have to have a plan in place, or districts have to have a plan in place where parents of students in schools that are not making adequate yearly progress could transfer their children to schools that are not failing. Is this going to be an issue where those students that come from these other schools that don't have this technology, are they failing? Is it that big of a deal? Is it that big a discrepancy in the schools? If it's issues like that, I think it needs to be addressed.
But I can say,
it seemed like it was from this. I hate that we always only get like a little blurb. Because it's hard to understand the big picture.
When you talk about, do the non-technology schools have the low test scores?
Right.
All the technology in the world, and we just bombed out at end of grade test.
Right.
So technology does not mean achievement.
I think nothing takes the place of one-on-one instruction or
I agree.
small group instruction where your teacher is sitting at a round table and pointing,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure everyone's engaged that way.
I agree.
Apparently, this is an issue because there must be multiple parents for this to be an actual case.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, I agree.
So I think the first thing, the schools should have a parent meeting and see how many parents show up and discuss possible avenues to take, lay out some options on the table that the parents would be comfortable with. Because I would get the parents' input, seeing as they're probably going to be the ones that have some kind of funds increase from that.
Well, like Susan said, we don't know why they were unsuccessful in fundraising. It could have been for a lot of reasons. They could have been doing the wrong fundraiser. They could have not advertised. Or is it like Susan's school where they simply can't afford to give any of their money? Mm-hmm. So, we do need a lot more information.
Now, at my school, our policy, we have to, the principal during the summer when they have principal meetings and all of that, she has to, there's a deadline from where she has to give the superintendent a list of fundraisers she's planning. So these have to be well planned and in advance. She can't just pop up tomorrow saying.
When I looked up ours, our date was June 30th. Like all fundraisers have to be submitted by June 30th.
And the school improvement team gives her ideas as to what fundraisers she can use for next year. So that she already kind of have a list of successful fundraisers.
Right.
Do you have a problem at your school with fundraising, Susan? Since you're like this, kind of.
I mean, my school does not do any fundraisers. We don't try. Okay. I mean, because we've tried in the past. I mean, we probably haven't done a fundraiser in 10 years. I mean, this will be my 20th year there this coming year. We really haven't done one in about 10 years.
So in your case, is it because the families can't contribute?
Mm-hmm. And it's a safety issue, too, from the neighborhoods and communities our kids live in. Do we want them trying to do a door-to-door? No.
Have y'all tried things at school?
Yeah, I mean, we've done some carnivals and things if we have like a small project, but for big things, like we have, each classroom in our school has Chromebook carts now, but like we got a grant from the Winston-Salem Foundation. Things like that. I wrote in my task too for the OMA, we had just a local benefactor that gave like $40,000 to our school for iPads. We just reach out to people and organizations in the community. But like I said, we have to do that in the summer for that school year. So you got to kind of know in advance what your needs are and what direction your school's going in. We try to base that off like school improvement team goals and things like that, which is how our county has it laid out. And so they need to be needs-based goals.
Yeah.
So, and is this technology a need in the school system? I mean, it just said that their technology program wasn't going to be funded anymore, but it never really said what it was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just said due to like budget shortfalls, its technology program wouldn't be funded, but it never really said what it was.
And two, it says nearly 2 years later, they have a smart board. So they
Right.
worked hard on that
Right.
for a long time. When did the other two, it says they also attempted, but it doesn't tell, did they start at the same point?
Right.
Or did they
I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's always so hard when
like a math
you're like
problem.
yeah.
The missing. Yeah.
Well, thinking about the other side of the coin, the kids at West Elementary, like they shouldn't be punished by some policy that prohibits them
Right.
raising the money that they're able to raise.
Right.
And like Kristen pointed out, which I forgot about, 2 years later, like they put time, they put work, those kids deserve it.
Right. I agree.
Not saying the other kids don't, but you know what I'm saying.
So I don't think they have a valid case, but I think that the parents, if it's an issue for them, they shouldn't compare it to the other school. It should be more, well, what can we do
Right.
to try to get our school in the same situation?
Right. I completely agree. And maybe this school system has no policies. Like when I looked, it was kind of easy to find. You know, I just Googled Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools policies, and then when I got to the policies page, I typed in fundraisers, I typed in PTA. Like I typed in some different keywords that were in the case so I could kind of see what we had. So if this county, this district has nothing, then yes, maybe they should have something in place. So parents will understand, you know, these are the guidelines, this is what this school was doing, that kind of thing.
I think that was good.
Right, I'll stop recording.
Okay.